Hey everyone, welcome to this video. Today we have a special guest, so Gergely from the YouTube channel Pragmatic Engineer. Is that right?
Exactly.
Pragmatic. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Both your name and the YouTube channel.
Yeah, we get both right.
Yeah, awesome. So hey, Gary, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know that you have a ton of experience, and could you talk a little bit about your experience and yeah.
Yeah, so great being on this channel. So I started as a software engineer a long time ago. It's probably like 15 or so years ago. I'm originally from Hungary, even though my accent might not give that away. And I lived most of my life there. So I went to college there. I actually learned to code a little bit before college, but I would say, like, I think college was the kicking stone which forced me to learn to code. I for a long time I didn't think I would actually do software development because I just didn't like coding. In college, my first class was C++ and C, and I just hated it. I was really bad at it. I almost failed my classes because that's how they teach you. You have to like pass these assignments and code on a piece of paper and that kind of crazy stuff. So anyway, I worked at a small company in Hungary, and then I moved to the UK pretty soon after. I started working at a small consultancy. We did some financial consulting, basically working for banks. And then I moved up to London for my first kind of big company job, JP Morgan. I worked on the trading floor, writing software. I wasn't doing any fancy trading, but that was the first time where I felt I was being paid, big money. It was, I think, like £65,000, which felt like very large at the time, and it was, and it also first time I was inside a big company. But the interesting part was I was doing all these side projects on the side. I was building Windows Phone apps, like mobile apps, websites, but no one around me was doing it. And I was like, what? Like, I felt like the odd one. Looking back, it wasn't a really technology-focused culture. And so when I got a call from Microsoft, well, from Skype actually at the time, and they told me like, hey, we're working on this secret project. We can't tell you, but it's the new Xbox One. And we're going to build it the same way we're building Windows Phone apps. I got really excited to join. So I joined, I like to say Skype. It was Microsoft, but it was right when Microsoft bought Skype. And this was the old Steve Ballmer Microsoft. So I know you're working at the new Microsoft. And this was in 2012. So almost 10 years now, 9 years ago. And so I joined. We built and shipped Skype for Xbox One. I still have it. I made this gold edition on it. And then, wow. and then we built, my team built Skype for Web, which I guess is a predecessor for Teams, the Teams project that you're working on, which is kind of cool. And I was a L62 at Microsoft. I didn't get promoted for 2 years, and the second time I was a little bit disappointed. So I moved companies, and I joined as a principal engineer at Skyscanner. I mean, what are the odds? So that was a really interesting jump from L62. I think I could have been maybe senior at Microsoft, but principal at Skyscanner, where I led building a new app, hired a team, and then I ended up at Uber as a senior engineer, which was, again, an interesting jump between the positions. At Uber, very quickly in Amsterdam, I became an engineering manager. At first, a small team of 5 people, and then over the years, it grew to a larger group of about 30 people, and I started to manage managers as well. So I had this career path of small company, small consultancy, larger company, but not tech company. Tech company, I would say Skype/Microsoft, and then eventually moving over to the manager side. And I recently left Uber, and I'm writing books right now about building mobile apps at scale. That's my latest book out, and I'm writing this book called The Software Engineer's Guidebook, where it's a work in progress, but it's going to be some of my observations and advice on how to grow in the software industry, from the entry level to the senior to all the way to the staff and principal levels at these larger companies.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I feel like I mean, back in 2012, you said you were working for Skype,
yeah,
kind of, right? And you were L62.
Yeah, so I was an L62.
Well, that's exactly where I'm at, but like 9 years, like in the future,
and you're in a different Microsoft. My Microsoft was very different. It wasn't very friendly, in the sense that I remember there used to be this graphic about the old Microsoft, where the divisions would like hold guns to each other. So I was in the Skype division. When Microsoft acquired Skype, we became a division, and there were only 7 or 8 divisions at Microsoft. Skype was one of them. But to get anything done in a different division, it was almost impossible. So we wanted to convince the Internet Explorer team to ship the Skype codec in the new Internet Explorer called Edge. Back then, it was still in the works, obviously, but they refused. And this was a problem because to get Skype working on the web, you needed to click to install the codec. But Google Chrome shipped it, like they bundled it. So in Chrome, it just worked, the Hangouts experience. And it was just very interesting. It felt like a very slow-moving company for me from what I interacted with people at Microsoft back then. But again, since I left, I still have some friends there. It seems it went through a complete change, and it's hard to recognize it, like, again, 9 years later. But yeah, the level system is still there. I don't know if they do the whole like 10, 20, 70% force stack ranking. We had that when I was there. And I think it's still hard to get promoted as with most tech companies.
Wow, no, but that's an interesting retrospective. It's like I see that, and then I see your career path, and I wonder, okay, like how, I mean, the topic of this video is like road to senior, like how to get to that senior level, and I think you kind of did, because then you jumped as a principal engineer. Which is interesting because, I mean, by the way, we have a video on Gergely's channel, so please go and check that out. We talked about like the difference between companies. Like some companies, you know, I was telling a story about how I joined Amazon, Microsoft, and it's not the same level that you can find in different companies. And how was this jump? Like, if you were L62 in Microsoft and then you join as a principal engineer, it sounds like, where's the senior level that's supposed to go in between? Like, what does the title even mean?
Yeah, so like, this is an interesting one, because every company, just like, honestly, titles are whatever companies make up with it. So like, if I started a startup, or you and me started a startup today, and, you know, we raised venture funding and we hired our first engineer, we said software engineer, and then we had 10 engineers and we came up with some levels, we could just do that. In fact, that's what most companies do. Now, after a while, you start to standardize these a little bit, usually because you hire from different places. If you hire a person from Google, they'll come in and they'll probably put levels in place that are more similar to Google. That's what happened, for example, at Uber. A lot of Uber's levels are almost directly mapped to what would be similar levels at Google. I know that because Google has a notoriously difficult senior bar to crack, and Uber had the same thing. So a lot of people felt they were down leveled. But going back to your question, I think the whole levels is an interesting thing, and I used to kind of draw it up for people when I was a manager, that most people think your career is like this line which goes upwards, and when you hit a certain, like, I don't know, score, you get promoted, right? Like, you get to the SD2, senior, staff, and it just goes up. But in reality, it's probably, even if there was like a score system, you kind of go up and down a little bit, or like upwards. But if you change stacks, for example, you put doing back and you do mobile, you kind of go lower, because now you need to relearn some of those things. And you also don't get promoted when you reach a score. It has to do with promotion cycles. It has to do with your projects. Have you shipped something impactful? It has to do with your manager. So at Microsoft, one of the reasons I didn't get promoted is, first of all, my biggest mistake was I didn't talk with my manager, neither of my managers, that I wanted to be promoted, which is a huge mistake. I just assumed I'll do the job and I'll get promoted. It does not happen for senior. For senior, you need to talk with your manager, because your manager needs to advocate. Now, I've been a manager as well. As a manager, you need to plan for promotion. You need to plan on who you're going to support for that promotion, which is why it's important you talk with your manager. At least they'll know. Maybe they'll say, we can't help you. The other part is dynamics become a lot more important as you go towards the senior level. So in my team, we were a pretty senior-heavy team. And to get promoted there were a lot of seniors. To get promoted to senior level, you need to demonstrate that you can do the work. Now, if you can do the work, but there's no work to do, there's not big enough piece of work to do, you're not going to get promoted. This is what happened to me, I think, on my first project. And then I moved teams. Now, when you move teams, it's really cool for experience, but you kind of reset your, like, a little bit in terms of like your promotion progress. You can reset it, because on a new team, you need to build a trust with the manager. It takes time until they give you bigger pieces of work. And then there's also the last thing is promotion cycle. So at Microsoft, when I was there was a one promotion cycle per year. that was the time you could get promoted. If you didn't get promoted, good luck next year, which is very, like, it's not too frequent. So the second time I kind of missed it, I was like, all right, I'm just going to move. So I think in hindsight, I would have been ready to be at that next level. I think over the long term of your career, it doesn't really matter, like, 6 months here or 6 months there. And I know people who have been extremely upset for missing a promotion cycle. At Uber, it was every 6 months. So if you didn't get it, you had to wait for 6 months to apply again. I can emphasize with that, but again, like, in the end, it worked out for me. So I went to Skyscanner. Was a lot, like, the reason I was principal at Skyscanner was as 2 reasons. First, Microsoft was a lot larger organization. We shipped huge impact. Like, we shipped Xbox One on first day, 1 million people used it. On Skype for Web, we built it to scale across the world with best-in-class systems. At Skyscanner, this organization was maybe 700 engineers, and versus Microsoft's 50,000, or I don't know how much. And when I joined, like, I've seen a lot of things that how we did at Microsoft, and I was able to just kind of hit the ground running. When I had to hire a team, they told me hire a team. I was like, sure. I was interviewing before at Microsoft. I saw how that was done. So I saw a lot of things that I could apply. So it was a bit of a stretch. I think the principal role, it worked out pretty okay. And then you see that after, from a principal engineer at Skyscanner, I went to what you would think is a down level of senior engineer at Uber. It was actually an up level in terms of compensation. And it was also an up level for, I kind of felt like the smartest person in the room in my little bubble at Skyscanner with the teams I worked with. And at Uber, I joined as a senior, and with the other senior engineers and the staff engineers, I felt like an imposter, like you. So I kind of felt that, like, levels are tricky. I wouldn't only focus on the titles. Smaller companies, it's easier to get higher and fancier sounding levels. I know people with 2 years experience or 1.5 years who are senior engineers at this small startup. And again, nothing wrong with that, but that senior is probably not the same as senior at a Google or at an Amazon or at a Microsoft, where you have now, like 8 or how many years experience. And on paper, you might not have the title. Maybe you're there already. But yeah, I think it's important to have context on what it means. This is the same thing, by the way, as what is a VP of engineering. It can be a 10-person startup. It can be 100-person startup. It can be a Skyscanner, 700 people. Or it could be Uber, where a VP of engineering might have 2,000 people, 2,000 engineers, which is bigger than most companies.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same. It's definitely not the same there. And I mean, it's really interesting, like, how it changes depending on what kind of company you're working for. But then, so for sake of simplicity, let's think, okay, let's work around the context of, like, these companies like of Uber, like Google, Microsoft, like this kind of, Facebook, Amazon, like all of them. I think the levels are kind of
they're similar.
They are similar. So what is the real difference, or what is the skill that will get you from that SD1, SD2 towards that senior level? And if you can also, like, mention as a manager, like, follow-up question to that, what is, like, specifically required? What do you have to prove to advocate for someone to bring them up to that level?
By the way, this is something I wish managers would tell engineers at companies. But by the way, sometimes managers don't even know fully, at least new managers. But in my experience, and again, there will be some differences everywhere, but roughly, an engineer one or an entry-level engineer at the likes of big tech, let's just say Uber, Facebook, Amazon, it's an engineer who's smart, who gets things done, and who can get tasks done. So if you tell that engineer, fix this bug, they'll do it. Like, they might have to learn the language or the tool or the framework, but they'll do it. And SD2 is someone who can execute more complex projects. So it's like, well, let's build this feature, and SD2 will come up with, how to do it. They'll pull in the right people, either seniors or non-seniors. They might help a little bit some of the SDE ones, but they'll kind of get it done, and they'll often be able to work by themselves. And this is, by the way, what a lot of companies say what a senior is, but these companies don't say you're a senior yet. A senior is someone who can take a lot more complex project, typically something that might span multiple quarters. It might have multiple dependencies, and it involves a whole team, and they will drive that project to completion. So they will, if need be, they could code the whole thing from start to scratch, but they will typically mentor and coach the eng ones. They're gonna often, like, act even as a project manager. They'll work with the stakeholders, so they have really good communication skills. They'll flag any concerns, and they'll ship impact. So they will get it done, which it might seem very obvious, but at these companies, it means working across all these dependencies, across the services, talking with things, making sure it's rolled out, and they will do it reliably. Now, the next level above senior is either staff or senior too, depending on how it works. They will often orchestrate multiple efforts across multiple teams. So it just gets more and more complex. And like the way I like to think of a senior engineer is someone who can de-risk the whole team. So if a project needs to get done within the team, or it's a team scope, you throw in a senior engineer, they should be able to do it no matter what their background. So I'll give you an example. My team was building a feature where we had to ship credit cards, like a new feature in Brazil that had to do with how we do payments there. And there was a pretty back-end heavy project with some mobile parts, and an SD2 was leading this project. But the project was not going well. We were behind schedule. The planning was not there. The teams didn't know where we're going. And I pulled in a senior engineer who was a mobile engineer, and I said, I want you to lead the project. Like, let's fix it up. Like, I could have stepped in as well, but I like to give people the opportunity to do so. And he stepped in. He kind of sat in with the backend team. He had them explain. He helped them triage the tickets. He reviewed the code, and basically the project went back on track. So that's kind of what I see. Like to me, at these companies, the senior level is a terminal level, which means you're not expected to promote beyond that, because it means you're, I think, a rock solid software engineer who can operate in a complex environment. And it means a lot more. Like, yes, your coding is there and you know how to get things done, but you also understand the business, you understand the context, and you know how to use your time the best. So it is a challenging place, but once you're there, I think it starts to make more sense. And the easiest way to actually see how these things work is when you work with people like this, because it might sound, again, like from the outside, a lot of people are a bit offended if they don't get a senior level if they were senior before. But one last caveat: seniors at these companies are expected to be able to ship reliably large projects without an outage, or at least not something that could be prevented, and be familiar with the ways on how you ship at large scale, so to millions of users, to on the back end, it might be services that are thousands of QPS spread across multiple virtual machines, yada yada yada.
Wow, I mean that it really gets me like thinking about, okay, there's a ton much of responsibility. Like when you said, okay, SD1, just give him this person something to do, and the SD1 will do it. And there are some companies that will give senior title just because you can do whatever you're told to do, right? Like that actually exists. Like or you're from a small company or a company with a small team, and that's like I mean, you work for a company with around like 700 people, and there's
that was Skyscanner,
Skyscanner, and there's like all companies that don't go above like 50 people or even are less than that, and I just cannot imagine what you need to actually have the opportunity. So to become senior, you have to orchestrate like teams. You talk about teams. Like when we mention orchestrating teams, how big are the teams? Like how many people?
Well, so as a senior, to be clear, you as a senior, typically you're able to ship some of the most impactful projects of your team. You're not expected to orchestrate all the other teams, but a lot of times to get your project shipped, you need to talk with a bunch of other teams because you're dependent on their services. You need to get code reviews in. You need to get design reviews. When you roll out, you might need to work with data scientists and so on. So typically, like the senior engineers, like my mentality on my team was always I like to rotate who leads projects, but if it was an important project, a senior will lead it if it had to be done, because I knew that they will either get it done or if they don't get it done, I mean, that's kind of the expectation from a senior. That's why typically there's also a pretty big jump in compensation between like to senior. I usually observe some of the biggest jumps in terms of base salary and equity. Afterwards, it's a bit smaller. So it is a big divide, and it is hard to get there, but people get there. And the nice thing, like the easiest way to get there, I think, is once you get into one of these companies, if you're not a senior, you find mentors and you see how other people operate. You also talk with your manager on what you're missing, because every company will have a slightly different view on what it takes to get to senior. But usually, almost every company, to get to senior, you need to ship a large enough project that can justify in terms of the business impact. So the kind of the what, and also the how you did it. You need to do it in a way that is, don't push people out of the way, like help the team, and make sure that your teammates are also feel very positive about you.
Right. And how, like, once you get there, how often do you code, like, as compared to SD1 and SD2? Because it sounds like the responsibilities are more towards, the design aspect, the getting things done, coordinating people, mentoring other people. So it's not just about coding, which is what I
So
used to think,
I think,
honestly.
yeah, I think that's a big difference. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. I was talking with a staff engineer at GitHub the other day, and we were talking about how a lot of people go into software engineering and they think, oh, if I become a better coder, I'll become more senior. And the truth is, there are jobs that are about you can code 100% of the time. They're the junior jobs. Like every single job that is more senior, or as you go even beyond that, it requires a lot more context switching. So just to answer your question on how often do you code, the seniors that I work with at Uber and the people I know at Facebook and Google, you still code. So you still ship features, you are still on call, but you do a lot more context switches. So if you look at their calendars, they're going to have a lot more meetings about design. They will spend a lot more time of their time on design reviews, on code reviews. They will be very active code reviewers typically, and they will give good feedback on design reviewers. They will mentor people either on one-on-one meetings or just kind of pair up with people. They're also going to be pulled into things like interviews. Some seniors, we're going to pull them as managers into performance reviews or performance committees. So you need to be a really good engineer so that when you have that 1 or 2 hours, you can have a really good impact and quickly code it. But it's a lot more context switching. So I think that's why it gets harder. I think at a senior level you can manage, and you can talk with your manager. So some people really don't want to do some of the interviewers, and that's okay. But as you grow, especially towards the staff, which when people look at the salaries, like staff engineers even make more than the seniors. Staff engineers are a lot more similar to managers, I think, in many ways than to actually software engineers in a lot of places, in terms of they will write even less code, but they will have, don't forget, your impact goes up. So you start to use your time with a higher leverage. And for a senior engineer, if you can choose between writing the code or helping an engineer write that code in a way that they can do it themselves the next time, or teach them about testing or something, that is a higher leverage activity. So you should be doing that.
Oh,
so
okay.
The way I look at it is senior engineers make their team better, both by shipping, also by improving team processes, noting when something is not going, by calling out people who are doing great jobs, by helping other team members get promoted as well, by the way, to senior to the senior level, kind of pulling them up when they're ready.
Wow. Okay, that sounds really interesting. It seems that there's a huge change in terms of what they do. And let me ask you this question: like, when you made that transition onto senior and then to manager, did you miss coding, or how was that? I just wondered,
So, for example, when I became a principal at Skyscanner, which I guess I skipped the technical part, but it was interesting because I joined as a first engineer on Skyscanner acquired a small company with 2 founders, and I was the first full-time engineer. My job was to ship and build that mobile application. So I started to build a mobile application. I wrote all the code, and then it seemed like we needed more people. We got more funding. They said, "Hey, Gary, hire people." So I hired mobile engineers. I onboarded them. And then 3 of us were writing the code. And I still wrote my code, but I started to focus on the less critical parts, or the things that were kind of could wait. And the 2 other people, I tried to give them I was orchestrating the work so they could do the more, very shiny or impactful things, so they could show off all the things they were doing. And after a while, when I saw that one of the people was actually good at organizing, I actually stepped back and said, hey, for the next sprint, can you organize the sprint? I was taking more part in talking with other parts of the team, helping how we shipped as a group. I introduced things like triages, worked with customers on their feedback. At a company presentation, I did presentation. So it slowly changed in that direction, but I was still I knew exactly what the code was doing, etc. And when I joined Uber as a senior engineer, I also I got familiar with the code base. I did a lot of code reviews. I did a lot of design docs. I still ship my features. But I very quickly found myself leading this project, which involved a lot of engineers. And I had the experience of how to orchestrate, how to make sure that we're actually working better as a team. Because it turns out if you just leave a team to do stuff by themselves, they don't usually do as well as when you have someone who helps focus a little bit, like I started to spend a lot of my time pushing back on stakeholders who wanted us to do like 10 different things, but I tell them, no, we can only do one. And the team was happier for it. So it's interesting. And now going back, did I miss coding? I missed it less than I thought I would. And I think a lot of it had to do that I did code for about 10 years. And I coded I went through so many different tech stacks. I started with WPF, with a thick client like Windows applications. I did web. I did PHP, ASP.NET. I did Windows Phone. I did iOS. I did Android. I did backend. And I felt that like on coding, I wouldn't be learning as much. Like I didn't know too much about the super large scale things, but as a manager, I felt I was learning so much more. So for me, it was the learning. And the other thing is, I don't think you forget coding. So like if you learned a couple of languages, you can learn another one pretty easily. You can jump back in. So on the side right now, I'm also just building some websites, like building this and that. Like again, if I had to go back, it would take me a little bit of time to onboard. But once you're there, you're there. It's not a big deal.
Wow. Well, that's great, Gary. Thank you so much. For answering these questions and clearing up, all of the doubts. I'd like to close with one takeaway I have from what you have shared, and asking you like what's like your conclusion or your like best recommendation for people to get onto that level. My take on what you have said is that, and something I see in my career now is learning the time management skill, like that it seems to be it, because if you're going to get to senior, you have to orchestrate and switch context between a whole bunch of different things. Then learning how to manage time and be effective, that's my take on that. I think that's a skill that if we learn, it will help us in this level. And the technical aspect just becomes like you're supposed to already have that. What's your like your last, let's say, conclusion or recommendation? And please let us know also, you wrote a book on building mobile apps, scaling mobile apps. Could you recommend us like where we can find it? Because that sounds like really interesting, like from your experience. I like people to know that especially mobile engineers. They can go.
So you'll find the book that I wrote on mobileatscale.com. So you can grab the ebook, or it's also paperback on Amazon if you're interested in large scale mobile apps, like the tools that large teams use, from things like feature flagging to how mobile is different, is there. You'll also be able to read a good part of the draft parts of the book to see if you're interested, and you can also learn from that. And back to your question on my recommendation to get into senior, I'm with you on the time management part as well. This is a hard one because getting to senior is a tough challenge for a lot of people. And I have two recommendations here. First, talk to your manager. Tell them, I'd like to get to senior. What do you think I'm missing? If your company has some sort of competencies, do a self-evaluation, but you need to get your manager on your side. I'm going to be blunt. If your manager does not support you, if they think you're not ready, you're not going to get that senior promotion. If you're lucky and you have a good manager, they're going to give you detailed feedback and help you. If you're unlucky and your manager is not like that, well, at least they know that you want to do. And then my second advice is related to this. Find mentors, who are people who you look up to. So in your company, if you have people who are senior or above, just ask them like, hey, would you mind, doing a catch up? Can I do a one-on-one just to talk to you, because I love to learn from you? And tell them on that meeting, hey, my goal is to get to senior. Would you mind us catching up once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes, where I'm going to bring you some questions on my career or some things that I'm doing, and I'd love to get your feedback. And that will make a huge difference, because like, to me, the whole like, what does a senior look like? I kind of put together the people who I know are great senior engineers who I look up to, and that is the combination. So find the best people who are there, and if you don't have it in your company, you can. There's also free mentoring services, or like where software, you can meet with software engineers. I have an article which we can probably link here on mentoring engineers, sure. And there's a bunch of places where you can either find for free, and like, I think that's one of the best ways, because the best person who can help you are people who you can actually talk and ask questions with. I think these YouTube videos that we were doing are great, but people can't really ask us immediately. So that's that. And by the way, like, just one last thing, like, for some people it's easier, some people it's harder. I've never seen anyone fail to get to senior who wanted to get there, who was open to feedback, who looked for mentorship, and who changed their behavior to accommodate for that feedback. So best of luck for those people who are on this journey.
Oh, Thanks, Gary. Well, thanks, everyone. Don't forget to check the links. So everything you said, Gary, I'll make sure to put those links in the description below. So thanks, guys. Please go ahead, check the link out. And don't forget to go to Gergely's channel. Thanks, everyone, and see you the next time.
Awesome. See you later.
Bye.